Welcome to Tech, Treasure, or Toss. Come along while we evaluate computers and other electronics and determine if they are a treasure or they're on their way out. Thanks for coming along. How to determine the value of electronics, especially older electronics. There's some things that we can check that are pretty easy. You can just look up the value and see what people are paying for these things, but you will also find the components. If you're somewhat handy with some tools, it doesn't take a lot. You can check and see that the internal components on a lot of these are very worthwhile, not just for recycling but for reuse. So the first thing you want to do is hook these up. So you get all your connectors hooked up. You have to have a minimum of a keyboard, a monitor, simple monitor. Just any old monitor will do, power supply, and power them up. See what you can do. So once we get to our menu, this is all good because it means everything inside is working. Not every component on here, like the ports, we don't know. We don't care about that. What we're looking for in this is RAM and processor. So let's go to the system information and see what processor this has. Well, there you go. This is a simple 4th generation 4590T, and you can see it's working. You can see it's showing its RAM, so that's what we wanted to know. And make sure that that part of the machine is working right. Pull these first. Trying to get the drive out is too difficult with those still in. The SATA board connection and power. So just pull them out. Flip this little tab right here and the whole drive pulls right out. It's like that. A lot of times I find that doing several of these computers, or any computers that I'm working on at once, not necessarily laptops, but it's much easier just to test them, test all of them that you want to work on at a time, 2 or 3, and then turn everything off and take them all apart and take out what you're going to save out of these and resell or use yourself. But it's a lot easier because you're not being redundant as far as your tool usage goes. There's a lot better flow. So doing all 3 of these will save you considerable time. Instead of setting the drill down, pick the drill up, set the drill down, pick the drill up. So you get them all done at once. The next thing you have to do is flip these over, and you have to pull the top forward. And a lot of times the easiest way to do it is just stick a screwdriver in here, because they're disgusting and dirty a lot of times. I hope you don't mind getting a little bit dirty, but it pops right off. There you go. There's your access right there. Okay, like we were talking about doing multiples at a time, you can see I've popped both these open. So what I'm going to do is flip them both open now, and then you can see that you've got 3 screws on each one of the heat sinks on these guys, right? So we're just going to take all these screws out at one time. I don't want to have to set the drill down, pick it back up again. It may not seem like much, but it does add up. The flow and the energy use that matters. Anytime you're pulling a processor, be very careful. There's pins all underneath that are easily bent or damaged. So you want to get it out nice and clean. Keep your processor intact. We don't care about these pins. These are going to scrap. Try to keep your fingers off of these pins and touch the sides of the processors. You don't want to risk damaging the bottom. Between the chips and the pins, and they're like little hooks. They're easily bent or damaged. Another good practice when you are doing multiple units at once is make sure that you got pulled out of these what you wanted to pull out of these. So we keep a count. You can see there's 6 computers here. And you can see right here there's 6 processors. So I know that we've gotten the right number of processors for the computers. And as I said, now these will go to recycling, and that's the highest and best use for them. They've served their time as a in-office computer, and now it's time to let them go be recycled and come some other components. An odd feature I wanted to point out to you is even though these ports are this clogged up with debris, probably from sitting in storage for a long time, collecting dust, they still work when you plug them in, and you want to see the specs on this and make sure that the internal components are working. Every one of them look like this, and that's what you've seen me work on. So don't be too worried about cleaning it all out before you get started. Just try plugging it in and go from there. You've got a lot of ports for your USB for your keyboard, so not a big deal, and the power usually is never as bad. And that's a much smaller internal port. Every time we're reviewing electronics, especially something a little bit older, for value, one of the things we really have to look at is what would it take to rebuild a machine back to working condition. In this scenario here, this is a little bit newer 800 G2 HP Mini. So it's got a 6th gen processor, and I've rebuilt quite a few of these for use, but it seems like there's always some little issues along the way. So we have to evaluate what's the time, how long will it take to do this, and if you have several of these, can you sell them individually? Then there's the shipping charges, which has gotten real high. Or can you sell them in bulk? Can you sell more than one at a time? And how much discount will you have to take it? So be careful with your evaluation of your time and what it will take, because there's also time and shipping, not just expense. And really, by breaking it down to specific components, it kind of lessens certain things like shipping and your time. It roughly takes less than 5 minutes to test one of these and to know that it's functioning and to open it up and pull out the processor. When you're dealing with things like Wi-Fi cards, once again, be careful, because there's time invested in that. Now you have to test it with a functioning system to see if it's working, and can you sell more than one at a time? What's the shipping on that? Shipping's difficult. Anything out of a flat letter type envelope that they can run through their machines costs you more. So it's not going to be just a letter cost. Anyways, so next we'll look at a couple of different newer computers. Once again, different kind of processors. One's an i7, one's an i5, one's a 7th gen. The other one we're not sure of. It's probably a 7th gen as well, maybe a 6th gen. But we'll talk about that in a few. Thanks. Okay, now we're on to a mid-sized computer, and then Spyron Dell. And you can see that still got the drive and it's in good condition, right? So this is our model, right? But is the value there to rebuild this, to do the shipping, to put it on the open market? Well, that's something you need to research and find out. Also, how much investment do you want to make? Right now, you can see that this computer has just 12 gigs of RAM, right? It's got a fairly small drive in it, and it's a i5 7400 7th gen. So we can look down and see how big our drive is. It's a terabyte, which is it's not that big these days, and there's no evidence of an SSD in this. So you've got several factors you have to take into consideration. You always have to look at all the different components it needs, how much time it'll take, if it's anything funky or loud or any kind of repair that might be needed on this, and then analyze what is each individual component worth. Is it better to spend your time dissecting this and removing the components and selling them individually and then recycling the box? I will say motherboards take more time, more testing, so that's the other thing. You've got to evaluate your time in all this. But research will tell you all the different values here. The drive will need to be wiped. All these different components have value, but just how much is it worthwhile to do? You can also find a recycler that once you've removed some of the components will recycle the rest and usually pay you something for it. So that's not something that's any different than the older computers. Even though it's a newer computer than the 4th gens, they're going to run into the same thing. Same with the 7th gen, 8th gen. Once you get past 8th gen, then usually the device itself, whatever it is, computer or laptop, especially laptops, have enough value to invest into the machine and get it going. But you want to constantly evaluate those things. Your time, repairs, and money investment, what components does it need to make it competitive on the market? And then what's the cost of shipping? How long will it take? Is it specialized? What's the competition? How many people do you have out there selling the exact same thing you're trying to sell? What's going to set yours, ahead of those and make people buy yours before those, or at least as often? And how often do these sell? So it's different if you're building it for someone. That changes everything. And we've done a lot of that, custom builds. But that's not always the case. So if you're dealing with, with general inventory, you want to do, like I said, go through these various scenarios and see which way works out best and go that way. Thanks. Okay. So now you're looking at the inside of this computer, this Spy Around that I was working on. And we've decided that we're going to go ahead and pull the components. The RAM we won't sell, but we will use on something that's newer. This also had a built-in Wi-Fi card. Once again, we won't sell it. There's just not enough of a margin in there unless you're selling bulk, and then there's a lot of time invested in testing and all that we don't have time to do right now. The processor, though, does have good value. It's tested. We know it's good. The RAM's tested. We know it's good. Once again, these are evaluations you need to make, but always think ahead, and if you're dealing with more than 1, 2, 3 of these kind of items, or various kind of items, because we'll cover some of those later, other than just computers, but various electronics and what's the best course of action to take with those. And don't worry, we'll have better filming for you next time. Just new at this, so I've had a few people tell me I need to be sharing this information, so that's what I'm going to do. So thank you for watching, and take care.